Good evening and welcome to the next episode of Studio E. I'm Jerry Morano, a member of the Demitasse Players Board of Directors. And on behalf of Dr. Richard Cerulli, playwright and founder of the Demitasse Repertory Theater, we welcome you to this evening's show titled Analyzing the Playwright. I also want to note that this presentation was delayed due to COVID restrictions. Tonight's show will take on a slightly different format. We're going to feature selected clips from the playwright's first play, Via della Rosa, which was performed at the White Plains Performing Arts Center and featured Dr. Benna Stroba, a noted child psychologist who played the lead character and role of Dee in a performance that received rave reviews. We'll also address autobiographical fallacy, where creative works can be interpreted as reflections of the life of the author. So tonight, Drs. Stroba and Cerulli will review and discuss the true story behind each scene. The closing segment of our show will also feature a very candid interview by Dr. Stroba, in which she analyzes the playwright. I've attended a number of performances of Cerulli's plays, movies, and also read his books, and I've never been disappointed. His works just get better and better. Richard Cerulli is an intellectual and existentialist with a deep understanding of our frail human condition. He writes with a passion in the hope of assisting humanity in distress. Over the few years I've come to know Richard, I've had the pleasure and opportunity to speak with him at length and in deep discourse. I not only respect him as an artist, but also as a person who has the courage to share his own life stories. It's because of that courage that the Board of Directors has enthusiastically encouraged Cerulli to share his life stories with a transparency that will move the troupe to realize their mission of bringing awareness to mental health and to use that stage as a means to accomplish this goal. The board also feels strongly about the need for the playwright to share the personal stories behind his works, which were written as a response to being raised in a very toxic environment that he did overcome and survived to be the man he is today. Tonight's interview will be a moving one. We emphasize that the interview was not scripted, but rather presented with the intention of being a fly on the wall in a therapy session. In closing, we want to thank you all for your support and kind reviews. And please visit our website to view our works and meet the esteemed members of our troupe. In closing, we wish to thank you for all your support and kind reviews, and especially to the White Plains Community Media, Jim Kenny, Rita Santos, and Keith Baker for all of their support. And if you can, please visit our website to view our works and meet the esteemed members of our troupe. So thank you again, and welcome to tonight's show, Analyzing the Playwright.
Rick, Jake, whatever, get your ass in the house now. It's important.
Yeah, what do you want, Dad?
I need your help, son. I'm really stressed from work lately, and Mom is with Connie playing Florence Nightingale, and I need an evening out with the guys. So, you're babysitting Damien tonight, got it?
Sorry, Dad. Made plans already. Sally and I have tickets for a concert.
No, I'm not telling you again. You're watching your brother tonight. You understand me? Or is all that long hair making you deaf and dumb?
Sorry, Dad. Sally and I made plans. We're heading out now. It's too late to cancel.
Oh, heading out on a date? With who? That black girl? Well, she's no Italian. But at least she's a woman.
Stop, Dad! You're insulting Sally and she can hear you.
I'm glad she can hear me. And who said you could bring her over to the house? It's my house, my rules. So, you think you're a man? You're a fucking communist faggot. Go see your black girlfriend. Hey! If you can't stand up for yourself as a man, maybe you should put on a dress and some makeup.
Get off, Dad. Please. I'll give you as much respect as you give me.
You know, your mother's right. You're the cause of all the trouble between us.
Rosa, please stop!
Go back to your own kind and take my useless son with you.
Well, Dad, let's see who the real man is. Mom's out to dinner with Dr. Valentino tonight at the Ridgeway Country Club. I wouldn't wait up for her.
Liar?
Need proof? Fine. Read this. It's a love letter from Dr. Valentino. And that beautiful dress, that's from the doctor as well. Go, see if it's in the closet. I'm sure she's happy in his arms.
Ralph reads the letter. He throws it to the ground and grabs Jade.
Oh. Back off, Dad! Can't you see I'm on your side? Can't you see what's going on under your own nose? Back off, please, back
I
off!
don't believe you!
Jade, let's get out of here before he kills us both.
Ralph approaches Jade for one last attack, assuming that Jade will cower and run. Jade looks at his father in the eye, then attacks him.
Is this what you want from your own son? Does that make you proud, Dad?
So that was quite a scene. So Rich, do you want to just give a little background of where that kind of came from?
Yeah, as we know, the play takes place in the 60s, a time of, changing social mores and a lot's going on. And in this particular scene, Jade is feeling the brunt of Dee's manipulations. She's systematically breaking him apart piece by piece, sabotaging his relationship with his girlfriend, his friends, his teachers, really trying to break him down as much as possible. She knows that he wants to get into college, he's smart, she's jealous of him, but with her Munchausen's by proxy, what she's really doing is if he can't make it into college, he doesn't get to deferment it, and he could wind up going to Vietnam. And there's a chance he won't come back. And at that point, she would be in her glory, because this way, if Jay comes home in a box, she could say, oh,
Poor
look
me.
at me, woe to me. He was such a smart kid, and he could have went to college. So Jade is seeing this, and he sees that the odds are against him. So he feels his only hope is trying to get to his father.
Right.
Now, there's also a lot going on in this scene. I'm speaking in 60s parlance.
Right.
So we see it on a primary level where the father's bigoted.
Yes,
Okay, and
very
we look and we
obvious.
say, boo hiss, rightfully so. But a lot of that background to it, which you can't put in the play because it's just too much, is that you see him as this soldier, this veteran of Normandy, artillery command, officer, and all these things, and he sees his son is an antithesis of what he is. But what really put a lot of emotion into it, there's a piece to it that if we look at the father, he's also a victim. Because what happened is he came to the United States when he was 7 years old from Central Italy with his family. Mussolini got into power, and the fascists, and they said, we're getting out. So he comes to the United States at 7 years old, picks up the English language very well, but he's still viewed as an outsider. So he marries Dee, third generation Italian-American, very smart, attractive, very high IQ. Her family's doctors, lawyers, and everything else. And he's starting to feel insecure. Mm-hmm. And what happened was, I was about 5 years old. I was having dinner at my grandparents' house, actually Dee's parents' house. And I'm sitting here, it was a hot summer day, August of 1957.
Okay.
And I'm sitting there for dinner. Now, you're 5 years old. And I'm speaking with a language I know now, but at that time I didn't know these terms. And my grandfather looks at his wife, my grandmother, and says, how is it possible that Dee so smart and beautiful, could marry a stupid guinea, of all things.
Right in front of your father, he said that?
Yeah.
Wow.
Now, you're 5 years old, and you don't know what you don't know what that is,
Right.
but you know it's derogatory.
Right.
So you say, all right, what do I do now? This is a really stupid thing. You know, you don't talk bad about somebody's father. And so I wrestled with it a couple of days, and I realized that my father and Dee really are not on my side to begin with. So I go to my parents, and I tell them, you know, your parents called Dad a stupid guinea. And they first look at it, and they said, well, the grandparents owned a lot of real estate, so they rented in one of their houses. So they took the practical view. Well, you know, if we close it, they'll raise the rent. You know? But I guess they finally got to them, and they finally confront them. You know, and they said, you know, our son said, you call them this, 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 and this. And you know the response. You know, kids, they have fertile imaginations, and,
That didn't
you know, they
work,
make
gaslighting.
these stories up. You know, Rich, you know, his mind's always so lofty. He made the whole story up. And of course, you go home, and you know exactly what's coming down.
Right.
And it's ouch, you know.
Right.
So when you look at Ralph in this context, he's very troubled. He's a victim of this.
He's stuck.
Yeah, he's stuck. He knows what it's like to be victimized. He knows what it's like to be looked down at. He's becoming very super self-conscious of his, quote, he's from the other side. Mm-hmm. And what does he do? Like, you know, a lot of people, instead of taking ownership of it, it's transference. I'm just going to push it on to the next way.
Well,
next,
he
yeah,
can
the
take
next-
it out on his son because he's
And so Jade now is getting beat up. He knows the battle's lost, and he's probably thinking, well, you know, that there's some pretty good beaches in Vietnam. you know, maybe it's not so bad after all. So he finds himself involved with Mustang Sally, who's a black woman, and they actually come to each other's needs. So it breaks the race line. It's in the '60s. This is really
but Ralph's
pushing.
still stuck in the olden way of thinking and
Yeah.
can't.
And so you
handle
got
it.
this shoulder length here, and you come home, and you know, the scene speaks for itself.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, he had a lot of, Jade had a lot to put up with his father, as his father had to put up with from his own childhood and then his young adulthood, and so it goes from generation to generation.
Yeah, you know, and when you look at it, you know, it's very thick-skinned, and when you look at it, you just say to yourself, you know, you have Dee, quote, the victim, okay, and she's put in this environment that's not very supportive,
Right.
you know, and then you have all these little personal insecurities worked around it, and it's all thrown into this one house.
Yes.
And I used to, you know, later on when I was in college, you know, studying physics and everything, I'd say, you know, it's like, this is really odd. It's like all these bad vectors just shooting down at this one house, and it just landed on me.
Well, then you can see, I guess, in the next scene that we're going to watch, some of Dee's history of where some of her troubles came from.
Yeah.
And what made her become, or partially what made her become what she became.
Yeah, exactly. And as we always said in this movie or this play, is that it was never intended to demonize the characters. It was actually brought for understanding. Mm-hmm. So people could look at this and say, all right, I think I can relate to that story. Mm-hmm. I've been through a similar situation, and it's not that uncommon.
Right.
And you could understand it, and you could actually offer sympathy to the people because you realize they're not conscious of their actions.
Right.
So, but that was it. It was, interesting journal entry that day.
Okay, I hear you.
Okay.
All right, so we're going to watch the next scene now. And
Yes, and this will, I think, gets to the root of the problem.
Yeah, I think so.
Open the door, Dee. It's your father. Open the damn door. sleeping? Or are you talking on the phone to Connie? Ah, Dave! You were always my problem child.
Oh, please leave. Just go away. Haven't you caused me enough problems already? Just go away.
So nice to see my favorite daughter. What? Hey, you look beautiful. Just like Ava Gardner. Sorry your mother couldn't make it. She's been working really hard sewing you a pretty new party dress. You were, and you still are, the apple of my eye. So smart, so intelligent, and always so beautiful and desirable. Too bad you had to marry young to that greenhorn husband of yours. You should leave him and come back home with your father, so you can take care of him. Don't ever tell anybody about this! Besides, who would believe a lying whore of a daughter like you anyways? Now, for being so bad, I'm gonna eat this whole cake all by myself.
Whew, wow, that's pretty tough. So you see a little bit of more into Dee's upbringing, and let's hear some
Yeah, it's
memories you
obviously
have.
it was a tough scene. Some memories about that.
Oh,
And, yeah, and as the play takes place, everybody's boo hiss with Dee, and people are starting to wonder, like, where's it all end? Where's it come from? And then we, at this scene, we reveal what really could have been the cause of all her illnesses. And there was some very strong evidence that she was molested by her father. And it would be very interesting as a child, she had a big fear for him, but she was also codependent on her. It was a very frightening arrangement. And when she was in her deep depressive state, she would write this. She had a good sense of poetry, but dark poetry. And I kept some of it at home, and it was all about the beast, the dark beast that attacked her, the beast in the darkness that lurked. And you could really see what was working on her. And she just really had it very difficult overall. I mean, it's when people who know me see the play and they'll just say, how could you deal with that? I mean, what do you think of her? I mean, do you hate her? And I would say, no, I love her as any child would love their parent. We're not looking at the person, we're looking at the disease. And when you look at her background, excuse me, I'm sorry, her history and the stories that go behind it, the beatings were very frequent, even as an adult, because she had a fear of her, a real fear of her father. And as part of her illness, she would, when it hit a manic state, she had trouble with money, spending money. And my father, who was a contractor, he made quite a bit of money. And they would send her out to do errands, pay bills. And at that time, you got paid in cash. So you just got the envelope, and they would send Dee, especially to parents, she's not working, she's a housewife, and, go pay these bills. And people thought bills were getting paid. My father thought there was money in the bank. And two events occurred right after one another. One is I was in the kindergarten, and I'm walking home, and I walk into the house, and there's no electricity on. I put the lights on, and now you're 5 years old, and you don't know how this all works. You put the switch on, there's electricity. I look outside, there's poles, and these guys come by and work on the lines, but that's all I know. And all right, so she comes home a few minutes later, and I tell her there's no electricity, and her face just gets contorted and gets really bent out of shape, pushes me aside, gets on the phone, calls the local utility. At that time, you could actually speak to a person locally, and tells them that you can't shut this power off, that, one of my children is very sick and has this medical devices, and we're going to sue, and we're going to do this. And I spoke to my attorneys, and and
Very persuasive.
oh, very, very persuasive. And I'm watching this, and you're 5 years old, and you're just saying there's something really wrong with this picture. I don't see any of my siblings on any type of life support equipment. So, what's this all about? And goes on. And then what she would do is she always had like the passbook savings. And I used to see a lot of times run over to a typewriter and put these numbers in. And I would say, I don't know, you go to the bank, the teller does it. And I would ask her, what are you doing? Oh, I had to check this, the bank made a mistake. Well, what really turned the tide was my father had quite a bit of money in the bank, enough to buy a house for cash. It's 1950, and in a rather nice zip code. He goes to the bank one day to make a withdrawal.
So nothing.
All the money's gone.
Aye. So you could see, so she had her issues that came from her upbringing, her own inability to manage her own emotions, and the roller coaster that she was on from her upbringing, and then it kind of.
Yeah, it just mushroomed, and this is 1957. There was the view of psychology isn't where it is today, or psychiatry. If you had these problems, and especially if you come from an old traditional home, you're just crazy. There's no sympathy. There's no working at it. Let's look at this. Let's try to make it better. Put it under the, brush it under the carpet.
Right.
And when she gets out of line, just say she's just crazy.
Right.
And of course, she was a woman, and so it was tough. I mean, I would probably think that you have to actually applaud her when you see this. And then one evening, I'm watching TV, as any 5 or 6 year old kid. I'm watching Walt Disney, It's like, wow, I guess there are some places where it's actually normal.
Right.
And I'm watching The Magic Kingdom, and I'm
Right.
thinking like, wow, what a fantasy this is.
Yeah.
And I just hear this screaming in the kitchen, yelling, screaming, and it's like, oh boy, what's going on
happening now?
But I'm curious, and I walk into the kitchen, and my mother's on her hands and knees, crying, and her parents are there, and my father's there, and they're taunting her, kicking her, slapping her around, and you're this, you're that, you're stupid. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you shouldn't be doing this. Number one, and you really shouldn't be doing it in front of the child.
Right.
But apparently they're all not too smart. I mean, really, it's. And
They didn't maybe necessarily see anything wrong with it.
yeah, it
This
was
is
just
what
like,
you do.
and so I'm watching this go on and on. It goes on for a long period of time. So then they get her parents, my father, get the bright idea that she may have put the envelopes with the money in the garbage, that she may have had one of these attacks, and they make her sift through bags of garbage. Now, at that time, they didn't have recyclables, so there was open cans, so you know where it's going. Her hands are bleeding, and she's crying out and saying, look, I'm having a nervous breakdown. Help me. Take me and get some help. So she's not in denial at this stage. I mean, she really says, there's something there. I'm admitting it. Help me. And they continually taunt her, slap her around, and they just leave her on the floor crying.
Right.
And that was my first experience seeing someone have a nervous breakdown. And unfortunately, I've experienced it with other people in life, like 2 or 3 times.
Right.
And of course, it never gets better.
Well, I'm thinking about your mom and the things that she went through, and then you seeing it through the eyes of a child and not understanding, but being able to know something's not right, which maybe she felt the same way when they were doing things like that to her, but wasn't as strong mentally as other people might be to overcome it. So she let it, not that she let it purposely, but it overtook her, and then kind of maybe hardened her a little bit to say, you know what, you think you have a bad kid? Look what I had to go through.
Yeah, she just seemed to, it was very sad as she aged, she just seemed to have made peace with her misery.
Right.
You know, she just said, this is it, and I'll just take it,
Right.
and it was very sad, but this was the inside D. Now, she was actually a banker in later years and very good at it. And when she was a go-to person. People in town would say, if you have a banking problem, go to D. D's going to take care of it. So, and she was that type of person, very outgoing. And so one day I thought, maybe I should just go visit her as a good son, let the past be the past and I'll go in. So I walked in, I guess she's at her office and there's a receptionist there. And I said, I'm here to see, D. And she says, oh, who should I say is calling? I said, it's her son. And she says, oh, the doctor? I said, no. She says, the landscaper? I said, no. She says, well, you're not the daughter. I said, correct. I said, she said, well, this is odd. She said she only has 3 children. Who are you? And I said, tell her I'm busy. I'll stop back at another time.
Wow.
And it was very odd. She, from the very beginning, there was this denial of existence,
And where were you in the family? Were you the oldest?
I was the
middle?
oldest.
The oldest.
And it's like you want to walk out and say, no, I'm Dr. Saru, the economist, but, that's only bravado at that point. It doesn't improve her a lot. And so I just walked out, and she calls a couple of days later, and I just said, I have to ask you this. And she says, well, they asked me about my kids. I just happen to forget. I keep forgetting to mention you. I said, well, I guess that's a small detail. I guess that's
Wow.
forgivable.
So it seems almost like she identified you as the one she's going to stick it to for her pain.
Exactly. That was like, I guess the voodoo doll with the pens. I mean, that was it. So
maybe, but for you to then see this is how it feels when your parents don't treat you very well. So maybe you can have some empathy for her because you see how her parents treated her.
yeah, but it was, and I can honestly say, people have a hard time believing this. Is it never really impacted me in a sense of damaging my own well-beingness. I would actually say it set such a foundation for life because when you see this in your own household, you have to assume that this is what a preview of what the real world is like. So not being coddled and things like that, really gave me a chance to be very dauntless in life.
Mm-hmm.
Don't expect it, and pull up your bootstraps
right.
and sorry, I'm terrible. I don't like cliches.
Yes, I know
I
you
throw them
don't.
in every now and then.
Well, I think, and in these 2 scenes that we just watched, you really see the polarization of parents. I mean, he's seeing how Dad treated Jade from his own background and his own issues that he had, and then how Mom, from the opposite end, how she reacted to how her father treated her. I mean, she really, when we look at other scenes later on and we see Dee as the not so nice and innocent little victim who's, who you could see what her dad did to her, you can really look at the polarization of it and just wow, it's really fascinating.
Yeah, and I would just imagine if she, she wouldn't go to get help. That's pretty, the denial phase is still, even when she admitted she had problems, she still would never take that step of getting help because she was afraid then she would lose all credibility. She didn't realize that people were looking at her now, were just labeling her as crazy. Right. She had it in her head if she went for therapy that would validate the point she's crazy. And that was very sad. And as the divorce heated up between my parents, my father was a very malicious, calculating person. And the question would be is, why would he stay in this environment? I mean, what's the purpose of this? And he was very shrewd. His thinking was, which I found out years later, is that, if I'm married to this woman and everybody knows she's not stable, if I go and have a series of affairs, no one's ever going to fault me because they're going to say, oh, I know what you're dealing with. There's we understand. We can't fault you. And so he parlayed that very well.
Just to go back for a second to mom not wanting to get help. You told the story before about when she was being kicked on the ground by her parents and her husband, and she's saying, help me, help me. They didn't help her. So
No.
to ask for help doesn't get you anywhere. Just gets them to
Yeah,
kind of put her down a
and
little
that's
bit more.
sad. You know,
Very sad.
if they were smart, loving people, they would have picked her up, taken her to the hospital. But as years went on and I was listening to the family stories and I was starting to develop their characters and taking notes, it started making sense. I said, even if she went to a therapist, which she should have done, or a psychiatrist or a psychologist, she would never be able to tell the story as it really is, because as with many people, she couldn't see the bigger picture. She just saw the attack. And what was really happening is my father was a very jealous person, and so was his mother. So, here's Dee, very attractive, very outgoing. There are any social event, people are coming up to her and saying, your daughter is so beautiful and so smart. And she's seething. My father is seething because he's not getting all the attention.
Mm-hmm.
So after watching this very carefully, my grandmother kind of, in a separate conversations, shared a story where she says, I grew up in this big family. I was the youngest. And so I had the hand-me-downs and everybody taunted me. And, I never had nice things. And I wasn't the pretty. And once again, she took those insecurities and angers and boom, levels it and takes it out on her own creation, her own daughter. Mm-hmm. And Dee, as smart as she was, couldn't pick up on those things. And I'm not sure most people do. I think you just have to go through life. And what I learned is just go through life with those antennas of always watching, listening. And so you just have this environment where you have this person who's born at the wrong time and place, who really could have been something, mm-hmm. marries the wrong person, and just so happens have parents that are not supportive. And, it doesn't...
Perfect storm.
Yeah, it's a train wreck.
And so it goes on, and you've managed to kind of stop the cycle, which is really important and good to see.
Well, it's not. That's what made me so, dedicated to making awareness to it, because people still today are just so blind to it. Mm-hmm. We all know it. You'll see something and you just say, oh, this is going to be a terrible rerun. You call friends and say, look, I think Charlie's having a little bit of let's call him and let's take him on. Oh, no, he's just having a bad day. And, and you just watch, and for me, that's very, I get disheartened in that.
That's it.
Because it doesn't have to happen.
Right. Well, and that's why doing things like this and making more people aware of mental illness, and that it doesn't have to be a stigma, and that it's something that, if you see something, say something or try to help, and that it's okay, and you're not alone, and there's things that you can do to get help.
Yeah, and I think that's why, the troop, that's why I believe it has a place, mm-hmm. Because people are just so afraid to confront things. They just, that's my parents, they have to love me, and if they don't, there's something wrong with me. Right. And they just can't rise above that. They just can't say, it's not me, it's them. Right. And people won't do that. And if you look at even Ralph, you have to actually feel sorry for him too. In the play, we didn't really have closure with Ralph, except when he leaves with his secretary.
No, don't give it away.
Yeah, that was, and that's pretty much the way it panned out. And there was a scene in there what I'm going to put in the next one. And this probably has to be told, because when we look at Ralph, as we pan in that one scene, you really find no redeeming value in him. You really can't. You're just looking at this one scene. And, this guy is, look at this guy. This is pathetic. But then, we have to look behind it, the fact that what he suffered and the slurs that he took.
Right.
So he wanted to be so much a part of the Anglo-German community. And that was his pride, that, he was socializing with the Smiths and the Millers. And, and this was, so much to him.
Americana.
And he couldn't understand Jade with his long hair and this pacifist view, but there's a side to it that, you can't, I don't know if you could really put it into play, and I don't know how you could allude to it, but there's an interesting sidebar. I mean, here you have a person who grows up in Italy, central Italy, and they leave because the fascists get in power.
Right, you talked about it.
So he comes to the United States, and he was very smart with the English language. He was very articulate. He could probably, when it came to grammar and things, you would send him a Christmas card. He would redline it, but there was a sad note to it when he makes that claim about, at the beaches of Normandy and all this thing. What's really happening is he joins the military because he's going to fight for America. And he becomes an artillery instructor. He moves up the ranks real quick. He's being told you're being shipped to Italy. Whoa.
Right.
And there's this big battle going on in this where you grew up. So just picture this person landing in his fatherland and firebombing his family.
So he's had a lot of his own troubles before, and you can see where that
that
comes in.
So he sees it, and he's lived a hard life. He's seen the realities and the harshness of life, but he doesn't know how to react to it. He just becomes bitter
and angry, and you can see that how he takes it out on his son.
There are so many different parts to the show, different characters, different people, events that came from your life, your own life experience. So what gave you the motivation to then turn it into art form?
Well, when I look back at this great dysfunctional family I inherited, and I say it lightly, I can honestly say I didn't write it out of any sense of vindictiveness or get evenness. I really felt that this story was not unique, that it's something that occurs more than people would like to admit, and most people are afraid to deal with it. People would rather live in denial. So I thought, let's just take this and bring it to the people and show them what mental illness is all about. And, of course, we have Dee, the character, who through the entire play is boo hiss, wow, this is one sick person. And, how do you survive it? But also, what the troupe does, as you know, is we try to separate the illness from the person, and that's what we want to do. So when we see this, we're looking at the person, but we realize it's like a cancer of the mind that has invaded them. So they're really out of control, So I looked at this, and then I started reading and doing some research, and the statistics show that only 17% of adult Americans are in optimal mental health. That really hit me hard. And at that point, I said, I have to write this and share this story. And I thought people could look at this and say, I've been in that situation, and you don't have to be damaged for the rest of your life. It's how you frame the moment and how you learn from it. So that was the motivation for doing it.
And would you say it was also cathartic for you to get it out and see it on stage, live, and in front of an audience?
Well, I wouldn't say it was cathartic. It wasn't that I had this and I said, wow, I got it out of me. I made peace with that quite young. So when I was quite young. So what I really wanted to do is let people see this and let people not be afraid to tell their story. As you know, people, you talk to them, they put this facade around them. You notice just by their behavior, something's not right. And they don't have this quality of life. And they have all these constructs in their head. I know when people saw the play, and I think you probably witnessed it at the cast party when somebody came up to me and said, geez, Rich, you must have been on therapy, on drugs. And I said, no. I said, if that were the case, I wouldn't be writing the play. So people have this perception that if you're young and you're in this family, your parents have to love you and do nice things for you. And if it doesn't happen, people feel that they're at fault. I don't know why they feel that way. It's like I failed my parents, but really it's the parents who failed them. And they go through life with all this guilt and all these hang-ups. And so I just thought it would be good to have other people really take a look at it. And I really didn't feel any bit inhibited to say, you know, here's my life. This is the way it turned out. And, you know, I have no regrets. I just hope that something can be learned from this.
And the stigma is then removed also from the idea that whoever in the audience or whoever's going to see it would think, oh, this is just me, and I'm the only one that has to deal with these types of things, and I'm the only one with a crazy mother or a crazy past, or which is another great thing about putting it into this format that you have to share it with the world.
Yeah, no, thank you. And you know, as you know, you were a founding member of the Demitasse Players, and we put this together, and we really thought, you know, the stage could really be a healing, learning process. And it was, you know, we had that question and answer period at the end. It was very nice when people would, you know, say, you know, I wish I saw this 20 years ago, because if it did, I would realize it wasn't me. It was my parents, you know, and I wouldn't have had to spend all those years in therapy. It's unfortunate for the psychologist because there's a lot of money to be made. So I'm not going there. I'm not going there. But you know, I think it hits the point that, or at least if you are in that position, go get help and talk to a therapist and say, this is what I'm dealing with, and this is it's not normal. Help me and guide me through this, and you know, remove the guilt and everything else that goes with it. You know, so that I wanted to do. The movie, well, the play was about an hour and 20 minutes. I think there was a point where we had to cut it. You know, there was a lot of scenes in there which were probably good scenes, but I thought it was just pushing it too far. So the question is, what do you put into it? And so I think we hit all the key points of, you know, you know, if you look at that particular point in time, there was a lot going on. You have a teenage son who's intelligent, and a mother who's also very intelligent, who tries to sabotage through his entire life. And so people just walk into this, you know, boom, 1969, and they just see this, and they're looking like, wow.
But there's a lot, but I think it was good also that there was part of Dee's past that was put in there to kind of see where she came from too, and how she became how she was, or parts of how she became who she was. You know, she did not have an easy childhood either.
No.
Right.
And that's what I really wanted to show, is because, you know, when you're writing, of course, you want to go through it, and you want to have the protagonist, antagonist almost switch roles. You know, at first Jade is the smart-ass teenager, and that's how he comes across in the first scene, and you'd probably say, oh, that mother must have such a hard time with that problem kid. And as you listen to her story, she builds this case, but as it goes on, it's pretty obvious she's got problems, and she's out to destroy her own son, her oldest son. And but as it comes to fruition, there's a scene where we understand why she behaved that way, and she was really the victim. She was really out of control.
I do know that people who did see the show said they at various times they felt bad for Dee, not for me, for Dee, and at other times they hated her, and they, you know, were, how could this woman who's a mother do this to her child? But then, as you just pointed out, when you see more of her vulnerabilities and what she dealt with, you can maybe have some empathy for her, to kind of look back and say, well, this is why I'm telling this story. It's not just that she was this mean, horrible person. I mean, she did a lot of mean and horrible things, but her as a person, you can kind of look at separately from her actions.
Yeah, and that was very interesting, because as a child living through it, you saw this. And there was actually some rather good redeeming values about her. I mean, when she was in high school, she was in the Latin club, math club. She was a thespian, a singer, was a performer. And she could have had quite a career for herself. But you see how her life was destroyed by many things. First of all, she was life's a lottery. I mean, there's a lot of prefaces. Life's a lottery with the first drawing at birth. So we can't pick our parents, we can't pick our looks, we can't pick how intelligent we are, and we have to grow into our own likeness. And that's the fact. And unfortunately, Dee, she picked the wrong lottery number. And to be fair, she's thrown into this, very immigrant Italian-American family. Now, the surrounding family is already 2-3 generations. They're all educated and everything else. But she is, she's in a very difficult situation. She has a father who's not educated, a rough construction worker, and she's a daughter, and she has a son. And at that time, if you were a woman, you were really looked down upon, especially in that tragic view. So, she would share stories with me where she would say that she came home from school and tell them that she was going to be in a play and she was winning this award for the Latin club or math club, and the parents never attended. So you could see where her pain and anguish lied, and she wasn't strong enough to basically challenge her parents. So she took all these bad experiences and she vented it on the oldest son.
Right.
And so I saw that at a very young age. So, so when people ask me about it, and they'll say, that last scene, when people say, "Oh, Rich, I can't believe you did that. Oh, that was so cruel. It's so unlike you." But there's a lot that you can't put into the play.
Right.
And I think to clarify that, there's actually a pretty good humorous side to it. But to put it in perspective, I just tell people, it's like when you look at someone with mental illness, you have to look at it as if somebody gets in a car and drives down a hill, a slippery, icy hill, and the brakes go. And on that way down the hill, they cause a lot of damage. And they crash at the bottom, and you pull them out, they're bloodied and everything. Do you say, "Look what a bad person you are"? Well, the person didn't do it. The car caused the illness. And so the illness, or her mental illness, was the car. And she had no control of it. So I always took that approach. But it was very interesting when you look at it and pull it all together. She always was a chronic liar. She could twist people around to know it's all part of the illness. And just very recently, I received a call from a cousin who's 93 years old, Florida, and who was a contemporary of my mother's. And I'm so glad I've actually connected with her. And she says, "Rich, so glad to hear from you. She actually was getting my newsletter, and she says, "I want to congratulate you on your work. It's very good." She says, "But, your mother was such a smart, upbeat person. I mean, when I saw your mother, she was always up and about, so charismatic, never a down moment. It was always talking well about you." And you say, boy, it doesn't end.
It's an eye-opener.
It's an eye-opener, and you say, all right, now I'm dealing with an elder, a cousin who I always respected, a very smart woman. And I said, that's that moment of truth. She has this image of this person, has this really fond memory. Now, do I lie to her? And say, yes, life was paradise, And I went on and I said, I have to be honest with you. And I told her the story. And she said, I just can't believe that. She says, I believe you. She says, but boy, on the outside, she was the most outgoing she could have been this, and everything else.
So your mom found a way to really put her best face on to the public, and then when she was at home with her family was when the real Dee came out, and it was probably harder for her to not let other people see it. So it was probably really a struggle for her to have the strength to do that.
Exactly.
Right.
So I think that was her survival mode. As long as she lived this illusion it kept her going.
Right.
It gave her, you know, looking at it, she was getting the recognition that her parents never gave her. So she was living it through at that respect and also getting back at her parents through me.
Right.
So it was very difficult, you know, even growing, you know, as an adult, dealing with her.
Right.
Because there were times, you know, it would be pretty funny. It was, in spite of everything, I remember when she was getting on, she didn't take good care of herself, and I'd be sending her checks. And, you know, people would be talking to me, so I spoke to your mother. She told me, what a bastard you are. What a terrible son you are.
Oh, my goodness.
And I would say, well, you should learn to form your own opinions.
Right. Oh, that's a good answer.
I said, you know, you're free to your opinions, but not the facts.
Right.
But if, I would say, but just in passing, you want me to believe the things she says about you?
Oh, that's a good one. So I think it would be really important for people to come see the show and to, again, form their own opinions of how great it is. And what a real, you know, real eye-opener and a good depiction of Americana. There's a lot of people out there that this is how they grew up, and how they've dealt with it might be different or similar to how you did. And it can give some people some encouragement also to, like you said, go out there and get help, or for a family member, or to make somebody aware of their past or people in their family's past, to see, you know, wow, Aunt Mildred really, you know, had issues, and okay, now it's a little clearer. So that's great.
Yeah, you know, there's kind of like a really ironic irony to this whole thing, you know, when I, a few years ago, was talking to some family members, and, you know, they said, you know, Rich, you know, all you've been through, you've really became pretty successful. I mean, that's a pretty good track record. And I looked at him and I said, well, you know, thanks for the compliment. I says, but, you know, I'm not a what-if person, but if you want to philosophize, I said, what would have happened if I had normal parents? Would have there been more ink on the resume if it were? And then I caught myself, and I had to say to myself, you know, if I had to do it over again, I really wouldn't change it. Because if I never had the event, I never would have wrote Via. I never would have wrote the other plays. I wouldn't have written a book, and I wouldn't have met so many great people. So, you know, in a way, it was, you know, I do hate cliches, and
Yes,
I
know.
you know how much I hate them.
Yes.
But I have to throw it in to make the point, you know, and given lemons, you make lemonade.
Right.
So, you know, I hope, you know, we're planning to do another version of it soon. And, you know, I just hope everybody comes out to see it. And I think we're going to adding a few more scenes, I think, just to round it out. So, but the sad irony is, just to add on, I'm going to say on a very humorous note, when she was on her deathbed, the question was, how are we going to make the funeral arrangements? She has no money. And, but she says she has an insurance policy, but we don't know where it is. You know, when I asked her, well, I gave it to Charles. Charles gave it to his wife went to Europe. And you know, so this is the answer, you know, you're going to get. So it's actually pretty funny. So she passes on. And, you know, she had a Roman Catholic Mass. And I wrote the eulogy for her. And it was a very positive eulogy. I don't hold grudges. And the bottom line is I got stuck paying for the funeral.
Well, there you go. She stuck it to you in the end, too.
Yeah, so it
no
was like, you
matter
know,
what.
it was just her
Her
way of
last
saying,
little-
you know,
Here you go.
just one more. I just have to zing them one last time.
And also your last chance to do something nice for your mentally ill mom, who, despite all the stuff she did, as you said, you don't hold grudges, which is really nice. And
No.
that you can see that, you know, she became who she became because of her past, and didn't take the same path that you did and became who you became from your past. So that's really, it's a nice way to look at it.
Yeah, so I hope our performance enlightened people, you know, made people take a good look at themselves and don't look at mental illness as such a stigma, or look at it and when they feel they're a victim of some of mental illness, and not to hide it. And, you know, go out and seek counseling as to how to do it, and just accept truths. As one person would say, how could you live your life knowing that your mother hated you and wanted to destroy you? And I said, it doesn't change anything,
Right.
You still have to live your life.
Right.
It's like you're not formally introduced to your parents,
Right.
right? I mean, you're just hanging around as a kid, and when you're 2 or 3 years old, you notice these people hanging around.
Right.
And they say, call me mom, call me dad. And, okay,
Right.
so you're just into this type of thing. And you don't get a manual, like a parent's manual.
Right.
So, and there's no law saying they're going to have to be nice to you. So I'm not going to go through life and, lament it. Life's to be lived, and just make the best of each day.
Sounds good.
So the next couple of plays will be comedies, just to,
Lighten the mood a little
just
bit.
to lighten up the audience a little bit.
Okay, well, thank you for talking with me today, and like we said, I hope people come out and see the show and have their own opinions and share them with us too.
Via Dolorosa.
I hope you enjoyed this evening's show, which continues to focus on Richard Cerulli's vision and mission to use the stage as a platform to bring awareness to the prevailing issues surrounding mental illness, and more so in constantly dealing with this family of insidious mental disorders. Our performances are truly a psychological masterclass. We also applaud Richard for having the courage to share very personal stories with honesty, insight, and without inhibition as his way of serving our community in distress. Speaking on behalf of the Board of Directors, we thank Richard for his tireless devotion in advancing awareness of mental illness and the need to understand the effects of this disease on so many individuals and families. Richard Cerulli's body of work as a published author, playwright, poet, songwriter, and screenwriter in totality is part of this genuine concern for humanity. I'd also like to extend our appreciation and applause to Dr. Benestroba, a founding member of the troupe who played the lead character Dee in Via Dolorosa, and for her tireless effort in assistance in producing this play and this evening's show. So in closing, I hope you've enjoyed the performance of Analyzing the Playwright, where you, the audience, truly became that fly on the wall in a therapist session with Dr. Cerulli and Stroba. To view the Demitasse Repertory Company's body of work, please visit us at our website. And again, we thank you for allowing us to share our performances with you. Your thoughts and comments are always well received. Good evening. I'm Jerry Morano.